Well, hello everyone, and welcome back to writing a programming language in Rust. For today's regular session, I'll be continuing on with the current sub project that I'm working on, which is um, writing an existing or rewriting an existing script written in Bash, or rather POSIX shell, and rewriting that in the I suppose, novel programming language that I'm writing called Laurel. Where I am with this at the moment is it's kind of taking shape well enough. There isn't too much going on in terms of requiring new language features for a lot of this so far. It's mostly been essentially utilizing the existing language features and um, maybe adding some standard library calls are particularly the main implementation point in a lot of these. And there are a few bits that I've glossed over, and I do need to go back and revisit them. One of these is string interpolation in particular, which I might be looking at today if I get some time at the end. But for the most part, I'll be, continuing on with this sub project, trying to get, you know, it done more or less as soon as I can, and also maybe look at some other scripts to convert as well, just to demonstrate the language and to maybe start researching the trade-offs in terms of syntax. So once I have a couple of these scripts rewritten, again, it'll hopefully give another point of view to look at these scripts and consider. So when I was writing this language, I made a number of design decisions and trade-offs in anticipation of actually using the language. Now that I have the language and can write scripts in it, I want to take a look and see what was the effect of those. Do those trade-offs make sense? And is there, depending on the use cases, perhaps I'll actually revert some of those design decisions and go with different approaches. So that's kind of the approach at the moment. It's really just porting existing scripts for the moment, just for the benefit of research. But that's kind of what I'm stuck in at the moment. So where we are now is converting the script for installing Docker using so it's a one that you kind of grab with curl and pipe into Bash. And I'm currently looking at a section where the script has defined is WSL to essentially check for Windows, a Windows-based install. And what I need to do here, where I had left this the last time anyway, was, as we can see on the right here, I hadn't actually implemented the contains function, or rather method, for strings. So this will be a prototype based method, which is why we're using the arrow notation here to access it. And so what I'm going to just do is go ahead and take a look at implementing contains. So let me take a look here. I think I've gone too far. So that's the list functions, trim right and to lower. I'd actually meant to prefix a lot of these with the type they're being applied to. So for example, list len here has the prefix list. So I might go ahead and put stir at the start of these string-based operations. So let's see. I'll just apply that first. That might be a quick refactoring just before I get into the brunt of it. Yeah, I think that's all right. So name methods, prototype methods on strings to have stir prefix. So that's maybe prefix prototype methods on strings with so that I get it within my 50 character limit for the git summary or the git commit summary. Prefix prototype methods on strings with that. Yeah. So now that that's done, I'll continue on with implementing contains. So maybe I'll reorder these as well, so that they're in order of in alphabetical order. So I've STA should be going there, and TR should be there. So maybe I'll just do that as well, just a little bit of housekeeping. And there we go. So I'll add in contains here at the start. Oops. And then I can go ahead and implement that. I probably don't need all those suffixes anymore. That was originally to prevent collisions with some, I think, built-ins such as len, even though that probably wasn't even strictly necessary in the first place. But for the moment, I'll just, I'll keep it the way it is for now and note that down for later. So let's see, how are we going to do this one now? So it has to be a string anyway. This is probably an area where I can reuse the macro that I created yesterday actually for performing. Oh no, because this doesn't perform evaluation of an AST, so that won't be reusable there as such. But there's a lot of repetitiveness here anyway that could probably be abstracted at some point within the built-in functions. But anyway, so I'll call this the source, and the second parameter will be the target. And then, now this is probably slightly trickier than it probably needs to be, because I am writing this interpreter in Rust. Generally, I'd be able to take advantage of the Rust built-ins. So for example, if Rust has a definition of string contains or some kind of analogous function for that, then I'd be able to reuse that here. I'm, however, defining the string representation in this language is actually defined in terms of an array of bytes. So I won't actually be able to use the built-in string methods. I'll have to take a look at whether there's any existing functionality that I can reuse from vectors, because I'm using a vector to store it. And if there isn't, then I'll potentially have to look at my own implementation, which will be, probably a lot less performant. But again, aim here is to more kind of demonstrate the implementation rather than getting the fastest or best possible implementation to start out with. So let's take a look. Is there anything like contains or contains as subset, for example? So we have contains, and that can check for an element. Can it check for a subsection? So and I suppose, yeah, that has to have partial equality defined on it as well. So what I would probably have to do in that case is, yeah, no, that's not where I'm going to get the solution here. Let's see. Binary search, again, that's kind of working on, I suppose, I assume individual elements rather than ranges. If there was something like contains range, though I suppose that's not really a general purpose method that I'd probably find here. Though, make ASCII lowercase, that's interesting. And in fact, I think I have a method implementation of that that could have potentially used that, though I'm not fully sure how that would work. So it takes the vector is the self in this case, and it doesn't say what the t or what the generic type is. Converts this slice to its are these part of a trait? Is ASCII checks if all bytes in this slice. So there does seem to be a group of these specifically related to a byte or vectors of bytes, which makes sense because that is I think a relatively reused use case in terms of I/O with Rust. I think vectors of bytes is a general or is a recurring theme. Though it is interesting that I don't see anything that, in the case of these methods, actually constrains the generic type to unsigned 8-bit unsigned integers. For example, with this equals ignore ASCII case, which could be, well, no, that's not what I want, but it's along the same lines. The second parameter, is definitely a slice of unsigned integers, but I'm not seeing anything that shows that the source has to be like that. So lang equals slice u8. I'm not quite sure what. So yeah, so these are operations on ASCII, i.e., a slice of, or well, that's an array of 8-bit unsigned integers. Okay. And so why are they implemented in vec? So these are methods from dereferencing where the target is an array of type T, but again, that's a generic type rather than specifically U8. It's interesting. These are the kind of pieces that I'm looking for. I'm just not quite sure why, or I suppose there are a few gaps in my knowledge that I'm not quite sure how all of this fits together or why these specific methods are found in this kind of general vec documentation. But that's probably something to investigate later. For now, though, it looks like there could be more relevant stuff here that could help me out now. But let's see. ASCII lowercase, is there anything like I don't know, an ASCII contains or something like that? So let's see where was I when I found the ASCII stuff? So was I around here? Yeah, well, we'll jump to is ASCII. We'll jump to the source of that. That's in ASCII RS. And are these all defined on, are all of these defined on vec as well? I suppose I can look and see if I find what I'm searching for. And then look for the same thing in vec. Let's see, we've got is ASCII. I don't see anything to do with contains though. Is sorted is empty. Has chunks maybe. No. Yes, I wonder if my best bet is to essentially implement my own version of this. Again, it's probably going to be the implementation that I come up with is going to be very naive. But I'm not sure if Rust is going to be able to provide anything out of the box for this. So just to keep things moving, this might be the best way forward. So let's take a look. So if I want to implement contains, what I would probably do is, let's see, I suppose there are a couple of things to consider. If the target is longer than the source, then that's an immediate disqualification and we don't even have to look. So that's probably one case to consider here. I don't think it can be kind of wrapped up in the regular loop. So let's see, if target len is greater than source len, then we'll return, let's see, yeah, and what, so these are going to be booleans. So new bool false. Otherwise, what we're probably going to do is say let I equal 0 while I plus, let's see, so we're going to want to say that while I plus the, in fact, maybe I can roll this in here. So what I would probably say is while I plus target len is less than source len, then we do a comparison essentially. Now just double check the edge conditions. So in the case that this is 0 and the length of the target is the same as the length of the source, that actually won't go in here because it'll say is the length of the target strictly less than source, and it's not. So what I'd have to do here is say if it's less than or equal to. Now this is a place where I really should have unit tests as well, to properly handle all this stuff. But realistically, these really will be implementations to just get things working. So I'm unfortunately not going to focus on unit tests for the time being, but just do a few trivial tests, and if they work on a few small samples, then I'll say that they're good enough. So we'll say if the target is, if it's possible for the target to be within the source, then we'll go ahead and attempt it, and if we don't find it, then at the end we're going to increment the range that we're looking in. And I need to change the names here. So and in this case, what I would say is, what's my best bet here? I could just do a yeah, an equality check. Try to get a substring of source or a sub array of source and just compare it with the target actually. So what we do is, let's see, if source, and I should be able to do something like this. So I up until so instead of I will call it window start. And we'll window end. And if that is equal to target, then we'll return true. Otherwise, down here, we can return false. And I don't think we'll need that anymore. So first of all, we'll see, does that actually compile? So no implementation for equality on those. Because I've got a reference to a vector of unsigned 8-bit integers, I wonder, is there a way of, could I do that? Oh, yeah, that seemed to handle it all right. Need to make that mutable. All right, so, and because contains is now implemented, we've gotten past this part without an error at least. But I do just need to make sure that that the function is actually working. So let's try a few test cases here. So if I have ABC contains ABC, let's try that. Yeah, that's true. We'll try empty string. We'll try empty string contains ABC. We'll try ABC contains empty string. We'll do an actual substring here. So AB, B, BC, and then we'll do some false cases. So AC maybe, and D. So let's try all of these. So the last two cases, well, this should be false as well, actually. So I'll put this down here. And yeah, we should have it so that the last three cases are false and then all the others are true. So yeah, so we have that. Now, this is the one area where I could be overlooking something. These kind of ranges, I feel, especially from my experience with Python, is an area where I'm quite susceptible to having off by one errors in particular. So what will I do here? What could I do here to make sure that it's working the way that I want? I suppose, first of all, what I could do is just have an example run where I say, you know, A, B, C, D, E contains B, C, D. And what I want to do then is just simply do a bit of print line style debugging where I say, let's see, that X is equal to that, if X is equal to target, and then here I'm just going to output the X that I'm actually checking. That can't be formatted by default. So let's try that. Now, yeah, the output probably isn't going to be very legible, but I can at least make sure that, yes, so that's not doing what I want. So at least on first glance, it isn't. So what it is doing is it is checking ABC first. So it's finding that as a substring and it's saying, is ABC equal to BCD? And oh, it might not even be doing that actually, is it? Is 97 the ASCII for A? I can never remember. I think it's 65 is capital A, but I can never remember lowercase a. Okay, so that is 97. So it is starting at the start of the string. BCD is being checked and it's saying true. Okay, no, that's actually all right because I was thinking that, okay, it's not actually checking all the substrings here, but it doesn't need to because it short circuits when it finds the actual answer. So if I did CDE here, that should output all of them. Yeah, no, that's actually all right. So that's enough for me to verify at the moment anyway, and to allow me to progress. So I'll undo those, uncomment that, and I'll remove this print line. And so the functionality here is add support or add string prototype method for contains. And is that the syntax or is that the message format that I use when I add these? I don't see any existing ones, so yeah, I'll use that. I'll use that kind of a message. So add string prototype method for contains. Yeah, that's all right. And so I can jump back to is WSL, and I think that's more or less all I need for that then. So what I'll do is I'll do like before and shrink the screen just so I can get the 2-on-1 visible in the stream. So next one I'm going to take a look at is, where are we now? So it does an error message, and that's all right. One thing I might take a look at in time as well is I think I will have strings just allow new lines in general, so that this kind of a thing is fine. It does mean that tabs and things get included in them, but although that is a good point. Anyway, that's a bit of a digression. I'll probably get into that sometime later. But so the next bit of this code is checking what actual distribution we're working with. So we have this LSB dist variable already somewhere else, I believe. Yes, so it's defined here. Oops. And I'll probably create a new method to abstract this part out. Again, it's probably easier in a shell script to just do it inline because what it's doing is assigning a local variable, and it's kind of, in fact, it might be, although it's only assigning one local variable, it could be, not quite sure why they didn't abstract it into a function in this case and have it something like get dist version and retrieve it from the standard out. Not quite sure, but that's what well, I'm probably going to put it into a function myself in this case. So what I'll do is, yeah, I'll start off with the I'll just call it f for the time being, and I'll extract the functionality, and then let's see. So I'll have LSB dist here as a parameter, and we'll go if LSB dist is equal to Ubuntu, then we do a bit of checking in here. So if command exists LSB release, then we run a command, and dist version, in fact I'll call this function just dist version. It looks like that's what all of these cases are attempting to do, is to just get the distribution version. So if LSB release exists, then I'll return LSB release, and this will take code name, oops, and then it'll pipe it. Well, it's piping it to cut, and in that case, I'm usually replacing the kind of cut pieces with built-in functions rather than using piping. I do think I'll need to add support for pipes at some point, but this is an area where I feel probably a little more readable to just do something like standard out, and so it's saying cut field 2, so it would be something like, whoops, so it would be, so I'll just say version is equal to that, our code name is equal to that, and oh, I'm not returning it just yet. But the yeah, just for the moment it'll only be in this scope, but I'll define it in here. I'll do let distribution version is equal to code name. That will be split on, I think by default cut splits on just single spaces, doesn't it? So if it's working with fields, yeah, it's getting field 2. What's the default field delimiter though? Oh, delimiter. Oh, tab by default. So I can probably, well, I don't think I've actually implemented support for tabs here, so this probably doesn't work. This would actually be splitting it on the literal characters \t. But yeah, that's something I'll address at some point as well. Let's see, I'll just add that to the to-do list as well before I forget it. Oops. So this will be allow character escaping in strings, and let's see, so once it does a split, you know, I'll do the same as here. I think cut as well is one, so 1 based indexing as opposed to 0. So if I check fields, doesn't say explicitly, I don't think. Oh yeah, counted from 1. So when that says 2, that's actually in array indexing, that's referring to the second field. So we've got the distribution version there, And then what it's saying is if distribution there is still empty and this file exists, then do this. And if we get to this point and it's still not populated, then it actually will basically exit this case without any values. So I'll put that in there. I also used the wrong quotation marks for surrounding Ubuntu. So what I'll do here is, yeah, essentially I can skip that by putting in some short circuiting up here. So once I get the distribution version here, I can just return it directly. And then down here, I only need to go in to this spot if LSB release is readable. So I think I had some code using test before, so yeah. So what I can do here, yeah, this was a little complicated and it's probably something that I need to add some workaround for, but essentially, so I had yeah, this is kind of doing the same thing as get distribution in this case, except instead of getting the ID field from the LSB release file, I'm getting distrib codename. Except that instead of OS release, I'm using LSB release. So it's mostly the same code, but a few little changes. It is a little complicated, so even that function on its own is probably worth converting as well. So I'll say get LSB release codename. And we've got LSB release. And if it's readable, then I'll open it and echo out distrib codename. And then I trim the right of that. And I don't need to make it lowercase in this situation anyway, I don't think. I don't see anything here to indicate that I would need that. So I can call that then up here. In this case, this actually, there's a subtle difference between what I've done now and what they're doing over here, because in the case that this file isn't readable, and potentially if this command fails, then this will still be populated, and if the file just isn't readable, then the variable just isn't set. Whereas there's a bit of difference between all of those bits and what I've done, so maybe I will actually inline those so that I can get it a bit closer to the original. So if I go like this maybe, and if the file isn't readable, then I will say return, or am I going to return empty string in that case? Hey Tomacraft, welcome back. So I'll return an empty string in that case, and otherwise I'll continue processing. I can probably, this bit here is a little messy. I probably could replace even these two calls with a function called isFileReadable, would probably make my code a little more readable. Will I do that? Yeah, I think so. So let's try that. $F, and we'll go so in this case, if so this really isn't fname, it's path. And so what I'm saying is, if this returns 0, then let's see. If it returns 0, then there won't be an error, and that's what we're checking. So that would be true if the file was if the file was readable. Not a great vote of confidence in this language that I'm having difficulty even reading the logic myself. But this is probably an area that I'll have to do further work on, is just how to handle those different use cases, because we do have some of these utilities where, you know, we don't actually care about the output of the command per se. Yeah, I suppose the commands we run in shell scripts nearly fall into two camps initially, at least. And there are, I suppose, in general, we want to run a command and we assume that it'll succeed, and we generally don't handle the case where it doesn't succeed and we just want to abort in that case. And that's why I think error exit is so prolific, because it's kind of like a makefile, in that if any of the steps along the way fail, you just want to abort straight away and say what went wrong, rather than trying to push through with potentially dodgy intermediate values. However, for some commands, especially these kind of test commands, which I'm somewhat taking advantage of, but for these kind of commands, they're not even going to produce output in general, whether they succeed or fail. They're more for the case of, we just want to know what the result is. Did it succeed or fail? And those are ones where we actually wouldn't really use error exit. I wonder if error exit actually applies to them. That's an interesting topic, actually. So if I do pash test error exit, that probably isn't going to give me the results that I want. Function tests. That's an interesting thought. I haven't actually thought about it before, because I've never really thought about how error exit works with the likes of the test command. And I'm not sure if it just works or if it actually ignores it, because it's not something that I've consciously thought. Like, it hasn't even occurred to me that might it require special handling. I'm not sure, but that's something that might need some special handling in this language anyway. There might be a special syntax for running a command when you don't actually care about its output. You instead just care about whether it's true or false. Again, there might be an opportunity to have some syntax, special syntax in there for it, or there might be somehow it might be possible to to have a more general operation that makes it how do I put it? There might be a more general operation that allows that functionality to present itself without actually handling it directly. I know that sounds a little abstract, but yeah, basically, can I have a general purpose rule that also handles that case? So let's take a look. What do I need to do here? Add or investigate whether Boolean programs have special handling. Yeah, and it could be that there could be a special syntax where, I know, again, I probably abuse the question mark, but there might be this kind of a special syntax or any number of syntaxes where it's provided before the process actually runs, and it's almost just a simplification of these pieces and almost works around the fact that, or it could be something like, again, just an alternate syntax instead of this question mark. There could be a special question mark where it just changes this such that it catches the error case of a command that returned as a non-zero value and just converts it into a Boolean rather than capturing the value or any potential output from it or anything like that. So anyway, that was a bit of a digression, but that is something that'll definitely be relevant in future, I think. So let's see, is file readable, fname, and if it is, then, or let's say, if it isn't, then we return the empty string. Otherwise, we attempt to read it. And that should be it for the Ubuntu processing. Now let's see, the next one is if it's Ubuntu or Debian or RASP, Raspberry Pi Debian, I guess. And in these cases, we check Debian version under etc, and we'll do a bit of sed magic on it as well. So in this case, what would we do? So we'd run the sed command, and it would be done with // So what we're doing in this case is replacing on each line. Well, this is probably going to be just one line. So it's going to, I'm guessing, well, I'm not sure actually what this is doing. So first of all, we're finding each / and removing everything after it. So on each line, we remove the first slash that we find and everything after it. Then we pipe that to a second sed process. And what we're doing here is we're finding the first dot and removing everything after that. So let's see. In this case, it's etc Debian version is the one that we're opening up. And now this is a case where, yeah, I don't have support for pipes yet. That would be nice, but I probably won't implement that right now, and instead I'll just grab the standard out from the first send process and pass it into the second one. So what's my best way of doing that here? Probably to, and this is one thing that I'll have to investigate further as well, is it's one nice thing about this language, I think, that I'm writing compared to the likes of Bash, is I suppose more, not more consistency, but I suppose if I do something like this second sed here, and if I did want to pass a string as an argument to sed, I can pass it very easily using the likes of that, and I know that there's not going to be any special expansion or splitting or anything like that when I pass it in there. At the same time, though, the other way of passing kind of passing in strings as almost like arguments to a process is via, the standard streams. So what I'm going to want to do here realistically, in fact, yeah, that's an interesting point, because I was going to say, I can echo it, echo the string and then pass that into sed, but I'll need pipe mechanism for that as well. Let's see. This is potentially an area where, yes, I'm probably going to have to leave this piece for the moment, because I don't necessarily have the mechanism in place to handle this properly. And I don't, I probably want to think about piping just a little bit more before I start diving into its implementation here. So I'll add this as another to-do down here. And so this will be implement piping for Debian case in dist version. So let's, so I'll leave it like that for the time being. And I'll just put a to-do in here as a string, and nothing's going to be done with it. So it's functionally, this will be a comment, because I still can't do inline comments at the moment because of the way I've implemented the scanner. So I'll just put that as a to-do here. And in fact, needs to be piped to sed, and I'll actually remove that to do. So then at this point, I'll rename this to dist version. Okay, and it changes the value. So if it's any of these, then it renames any integer values for the version to its kind of code name. So let's see if dist version, and I'll need to actually convert that to a string, even though, so in Bash, these will be strings, I believe. I need to make that explicit in this language because there is explicit support for strings. And we've got 9 and 8. And otherwise we return empty string. Although I can probably put that down here, because if none of these cases match, then dist version will be empty anyway. Well, it'll be undefined actually, but I'm not sure if bash makes a meaningful distinction between those. I think there are some flags that I can pass to test to check whether something is undefined as opposed to just not just an empty string. But it'll depend on whether that's actually used in this script or not. So we've got bullseye, Buster, Stretch, and Jesse. So with those done, next we have the CentOS distributions. And SLES. Not sure what all those are, but so this is, I think, similar to above actually. So we have okay, so it's not the same as up here because this was again LSB release. This is OS release, but we did have OS release earlier up here under get distribution, and I can actually change this now to is readable. And that's fname, or I think it was called is file readable. Yeah. And what I want to do next then is, let's see, so it'll be again using similar functionality. So if distribution version isn't defined by this point, I'm not sure how dist version would have been defined by that point because all of these branches are mutually exclusive. So that might actually be, I wonder if that's a redundant operation. But anyway, what I'll do is, let's see. I can probably use the same processing from there again here. So it's going to say if that file is readable, then it's going to output a version ID this time. And do that. And then in all other cases, what's it going to do? It's going to check, similar to the Ubuntu case, it's going to check if that exists. Then it'll set it to the value in that file. So except in this case, LSB release is going to use the release flag, and otherwise it's going to try and perform the same as this piece. Now there's a fair bit of duplication going on there, and it's made a good bit trickier to read because of the, I suppose, the current verbosity of the language that I'm writing. But it at least should be correct from the looks of things. Let's just double check the actual output by this point and just see what's going on. So we have an open brace somewhere that's causing things to go wrong. So how do I narrow this down? What I'll probably do is start removing chunks of code and doing a binary search to see where is the issue happening. So not in there. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm actually just going to take a quick break and then I'll continue with debugging this. So see everyone in a minute. And back. So yeah, so need to figure out exactly where this syntax issue is coming from. And if I remove all that, I get an issue about dist not being defined. I've probably added a typo to some other section of code. But for the moment, I'll try to examine where I've introduced the syntax issue. So it's in this section. And yes, so well, actually no. Well, that should be like that, and regardless. Oh, and I probably was missing the dollar before. Oh no, that should be a string actually. So maybe if let's see if I remove those. Yeah, so it's somewhere along here. Okay, so it seems to be in this section. If I remove that, the error is gone. So it seems to be something to do with the opening parentheses, unrecognized token. For some reason, if I remove the bang from the start, there is okay, interesting. I wonder is the bang token binding too tightly, perhaps? Or now this is going to require me to open the actual parser file, which can result in pretty hefty compile times. It could be caused by not handling these sections correctly. I wonder if this should actually be, so all the rest of these, okay, so I've got factor and expression, that's expression. And I've got application. Yeah, so I should probably I think I saw a repo by the person I discussed before, Adam McDaniel, and the way he had kind of structured his kind of recursive definition of expressions while avoiding what's it called, while avoiding conflict, was a very straightforward approach of adding numbers after each of these. So this would be expression 0, expression 1, and so on. I should probably adopt that kind of an approach in future, but I think that's probably where this syntax issue is getting generated, and even just the kind of somewhat broken or maybe less straightforward naming convention that I'm using here. So in this case, on the left-hand side, for these expressions that have an expression on the left and the right, on the left we have the current expression followed by an expression that's defined one step lower. So these are all factor. They should probably be term as well. So if those are all changed to term, then in here we'd have term followed by factors. Down here we should have factors followed by applications. And does this expression underscore, that must exist still. So that's the final piece, and that's being skipped. So those should probably be application. And in fact, I'm actually just going to go ahead and sneak a peek at these the repos that I'm talking about. So if we take a look, again, it's often useful to look at existing examples of code, sometimes even more so than the docs. I found this person's code to be quite clear, so I think it's a useful reference. So this might not have been the reference I saw before. Was it was it this one? If I take a look at source, no, this doesn't seem to be using the LALRPOP parser anymore. So let's take a look here. Source LALRPOP. Yes, so here we have expression precedence 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and so on. So what is happening here is we can do not a value of the current precedence, or so these are going down in value. So yeah, so similar to the way I'm doing it, except I just have demonstrably worse names for them, I think. But okay, so I could potentially have the lower precedence expressions on both sides, although here there's an equal precedence one on the right hand side, but not on the left. And here it's the current production. But anyway, so if I understand correctly, I'll probably have to refactor a couple of bits here, but I think I'll start off with this anyway. Oh no, looking forward to the compile times here. Could be here for a while. Don't think I pushed my latest changes, so I'll do that. I don't think it's resulted in a conflict, at least, because I think it would have errored out by now if there was an issue like that. Okay, yeah, so that seems to have compiled. Okay, so now it seems to have actually made it past that point. So that was the issue there. And even just from looking at it, I can see a number of other productions that seem like they need to be fixed. Um, and so the decision of what to put on what side comes down to the binding mechanism that I'll be using. But yeah, first I'll try and fix this issue. So I've dist defined somewhere where it's not been declared. So I think those are the only places. Yep. Cool. So that's at least compiling again now. What I'll probably do though is update these. So these should probably, in fact, this can probably refer to the same production. Let's try that. And I'll go back along as well and just make sure. No, no, that did not like that. Let's try just these. So I'm just making sure that all of these are referring to the production below the current production. So and so these are all defined with a kind of a left associativity. So these are going to be bound more tightly, I believe. So factor is on the right hand side of all these, but these should actually all be term, I would say. Expression here, that seems to be fine. So let's try this. Let me just double check this source as well, because there is a section where it's saying not, and it's using its own production, which seems like it should be fine. But for some reason it isn't. But anyway, application should be referring to expression underscores. I believe, although they might be all right because they're not actually I don't think they're ambiguous in the same way that these operators are, because they have these delimiters. These might actually be all right to just use straight expressions with. Yeah, and then we have the kind of the basic keywords. So that should more or less be all right for these anyway, I think. Yeah, I'll leave that the way it is. And I'll just double check with that not expression. I don't think it's going to allow me to do that, but I'm just going to double check that is what caused the conflict. So I'll start off with resolving the incorrect nesting in the LALRPOP productions. Yeah, so that's definitely not allowed. So I'll put that back the way it was. Correct recursive. And now that that's in place, I can continue on there. So, and what do I do in this section? I added support for dist version. And in fact, I should probably print out the result of running that and add it to main. Now that does shadow the local variable, or the function shadows the local variable version. So I'll do it like that, and we go print, and try this. LSB dist isn't defined. Now where is that happening? Oh, interesting. So I currently don't seem to be checking that the number of arguments that I'm passing to a function is equal to the number of parameters that it gets. So let's just check there to see. Do I get in here? Yeah, so it is, even though the number of arguments being passed is incorrect, I'm still getting the JavaScript functionality where where the function is getting called anyway. So maybe that's something to correct now. And now that I've caught it, so let's see. So this would be an expression call. I thought I was doing a zip with the arguments, and I would have thought that that would result in a runtime error if the zip wasn't correct. So this is a user-defined function. Let's just take a look at the bindings that I get. So yeah, so I actually and in fact I'll output as well the arg names and the vowels. Just to prove that they're of the same length. Or to prove that they're not of the same length. So the value was moved there. Let's try just referencing it for the moment. can't do it like that. Where's vals coming from? And maybe I'll just clone it there actually. Yeah, so it starts off with the LSB dist argument name, but then vals is empty. So the resulting binding list of bindings is empty as well. So that somewhat makes sense that that it wouldn't panic just because the lists were of different lengths, and instead returns the resulting list is the smaller length of the two lists. So I'll need to add in some extra handling here myself to take care of this. So if arg names length is not equal to vals length, then let's see. Oh, I think my earphones are going to give up shortly, so I might have to move to the laptop speakers, but that should be all right. Oh, there we go. I think. Yeah, I think I can still speak though. Cool. So let's see. In this case, yeah, I will return an error saying what. So let's try that. Function requires 1 argument and got 0. So could probably add in some processing to get the plural form correct, but I think that's all right. And now invalid types. So we have so I'll probably want to have some nicer formatting on strings at some point, but we have an invalid types error somewhere here in get dist version. So let's try and track that issue down. So print 1. Not quite sure what I expected there. I think so it's Debian, so I'll probably put it somewhere in here. Print 1, 2, and 3. I'll try that. Okay, so it wasn't in there. I'll just print out LSB dist just to be sure, and I'll print 5 there. So it's saying Debian, but it's not going into this section of the code. That's interesting. 6 and 7 down here. So is the oh, it could be something like the binding is actually getting messed up from the associativity of the operators. So if I put parentheses around everything like that, yeah, so that's running at least, but that's still an issue with the associativity. So I must take a look at, so I can remove from this section anyway because those won't get called. And so if I remove the parentheses around that, that gives me an error. And because it's binding this more tightly than the equal sign, whereas the OR operation should be very have a very low strength of binding. So let's take a look. Should those all be changed to term? Again, maybe I'll get up that and it was Atom, I think, was the project. So let's see. In this case, this person put the current production on the right hand side. Again, that's something I need to look into in terms of whether my operations are going to be left or right associative. But I don't see where this issue with the strength of the binding is coming into play here. Oh, it's because these are being defined in the same group as the equality operators. So realistically, those should be handled at a much lower stage. So if I put those, let's see. So these bind very kind of loosely, and then they get tighter and tighter the higher up we go. So maybe maybe I'll put them in here with these. Yeah, I suppose here will do for now, and I can take a further look at another time just to confirm where all of these should go. And maybe that's something to add to the to-do list as well, is to just investigate or research the exact binding rules in Scanner. Yeah, so at least that is that's working again now without the binding, I should say. Yes. Okay, that's all right. And so this is giving an empty string at the moment. Let's just double check what this version is here at this point. when we run it in here. So it is bullseye, but that's not being returned. Okay, so one thing I will need to do here is do a trim right as well. Oops, not on that, but on this. Makes the line a little long, but I think that's all right for now. And yeah, so we at least have that functionality now. And there's a fix to the operator association as well. So let's see. So that's the first change I'll make. So commit and ensure number of arguments to function calls are correct. That's far too many characters. So correct association of comparison operators. And then finally, add checking or retrieving distribution version to Docker script. We find it. And I also noticed that I have a file that I didn't add as well. Add all right, so with that all done, that's going to be all I work on that script for today. The one thing that I was going to take a look at potentially, though it is something that probably will take a fair bit of time, but is looking at where is it now? Yeah, following on from I think it was last week or the week before, I was implementing strings have a byte array implementation. What I might do is follow on from that and look at interpolation for strings, and this will hopefully just be kind of a quality of life improvement for using strings in this language. I'll probably keep the syntax fairly simple, I hope. So the syntax I'm considering for this is, first of all, it'll probably be the regular string syntax, but with a prefix, such as the dollar symbol. So if we have A, B, C, D, E, F, then if I don't have the dollar prefix, this won't get expanded. But if I have the dollar prefix,
Testing. Yeah. So, falling back to laptop audio. So, um, those yeah. With that said, so this is probably going to be the syntax. I know a lot of languages. Well, a lot of languages do seem to like using string-like delimiters, such as backticks, or so I think PHP uses double quotes for interpolation and single quotes for non-interpolated. And same with Bash actually, which is probably where PHP got it. Um, and then some other languages use backticks for the interpolated version. I think JavaScript does it this way. Um, I've Again, this is kind of one of these things that tripped me up a bit. I feel when I started programming was, I don't know, even just how subtle the difference between, for example, single quotes and double quotes were in the likes of PHP and Bash, and then going to Python, where you could use both, but there, from what I recall, there's no meaningful distinction between the two. So it's somewhat redundant. Now it does give you the flexibility of, if you have a string that contains the character that you're using as a delimiter, then you can use the other kind of delimiter to make that slightly easier. In this language, I'm going to take the approach of there's one type of delimiter you can use for strings, and if you prefix it with a special syntax, then which is just going to be dollar for now, then it'll be interpolated. Similarly, well, not necessarily similarly, but following on from that, then the syntax I'll be using for actual expansion will be these braces. So if um, so I'll probably say that the dollar notation has to be included. So it would be probably easy enough to remove the dollar inside of these. It wouldn't be ambiguous. But just for consistency, I'm going to say that the dollar symbol needs to be retained in there. So we'd have, X and X. Another thing, so these won't be full expressions in here either, so I won't be able to do something like X plus X. In there, it would have to be, that would have to be performed outside the interpolation and then used inside. Again, just to avoid too much going on in a single statement. And were there any other decisions that I made? Yeah, the final one then is that, yeah, it'll be kind of standard. I think is the name mustache style. Well, no, actually, mustache, and or is it handlebars? I know. Basically, it'll be single brace for interpolation, and double braces will be used for escaping. And then, I suppose it's probably easy to then get into discussions of, is that optimal in all cases? What if you're writing code generate, or what if you're generating code and you wanted to do like, generate an if statement, you end up with these kind of blocks where you have to do a load of this escaping. And what I would say is, at least insofar as this language is concerned, if it just is a trade-off basically, and this is the trade-off that I'm making, that yes, this isn't going to be probably optimal in all cases. If there is going to be a situation where this is causing an issue with templating, for example, then I would say it's the point that it would be an area where an actual templating library should be used rather than trying to shoehorn it into using the interpolation of the language. Again, it's one of these cases where when to draw the line. But I this language will be taking the approach of just having very rudimentary implementation of interpolation, just to make some things, some common cases a bit easier, but it's not going to try and address every use case. So with that all said, let's go ahead and take a look at how that might be implemented. Now, this is something that I haven't actually looked at all. In fact, all I did really was decide how it's going to look and feel. Beyond that, I haven't actually taken too much of a look. So what I'll have to do is, I don't have too much time left in the stream, so I probably won't get too much done today, but I'll take a look at the docs for LALRPOP, and I'll probably take this away with me for homework. So let's take a look. Controlling the lexer, I think, is probably what. Oops. Maybe if I do it like that. Yeah. So so we've got a bit of documentation here. Yeah, this is, thinking about it a bit more, it's probably at the point actually where even the strings, the string processing functionality that I have at the moment isn't so sophisticated. It basically says, defines a string as starting with a single quote and captures a number of non-single quote characters and then finally ends with a single quote. So it doesn't handle escaping even. So even before I look at string interpolation, I actually need to start handling escape sequences and things like that in these strings. So maybe I won't, with that in mind, I probably won't go into that today. So, and instead I will, what will I do? Is there any kind of low hanging fruit in my to-do list? Let's see. So let's close that off. So that's still the next thing that I think I'll work on outside of the ongoing refactoring or script migration work. But in terms of adding new features, I suppose I can look at pipes and context and failing on non-zero in the case of Boolean processes, or what I'll call Boolean processes at the moment. The difficulty with some of these is that I haven't really decided on a syntax in particular. I have ideas, but I really want to see. That's kind of one of the reasons for going through the likes of this script, and in future going through some of these scripts, is that I can have a little repo of example code that I can use to potentially help define the syntax of these pieces. Interpolation, I've more or less settled in the short term on what the syntax is going to be here. These ones less so. So they're probably not really suitable for addressing right now. Processes and async processes, again, I'd rather get to those in their own context before implementing them. Though, yeah, stack trace and error handling are probably, there's probably good opportunity for handling those as well early enough. So what I'll do is I'll mark with stars, maybe extra stars, the ones that are probably, that I probably don't have to think too much about syntax, rather. and can actually start thinking about implementation. Standard library is something that I'm going to be defining as I go along. Imports could be something as well. Globbing, yeah, that's an interesting one because it's a feature that I don't think even needs to be part of the standard library almost, that I could actually have a separate program, called glob, that even Bash could call, um, and use that to implement globbing. That it doesn't really need to be part of the language or the library. It could be a totally separate program. But yeah, still probably one that I want to have a few exercises available to test out before I start playing around with it. Prototypes and string splitting. Yeah, that's probably something to look at soon enough. An asynchronous spawn. And yeah, those are things that I really need to get to sooner rather than later. So maybe those actually are the ones to start working in the second half of future streams. So what I'll do, yeah, that's probably it more or less for today. Maybe no, I won't implement that for now. Yeah, so I'll leave that for today. Uh, these will probably be areas of investigation for future streams. I probably do want to do a little bit of research so that I'm not learning all of it on the fly, and resulting in quite a boring stream. Well, more so than usual. And yeah, so today's stream was more or less getting through more of that Docker get file, resolved a number of issues in the scanner itself, actually, in terms of association rules, and bindings, and just some bits and pieces in that area. So anyway, thanks very much for tuning in, everyone, and thanks for the comments, and I'll see you all again next week. Take care. Bye.